Good day and welcome to part 2 of this first tutorial to help you get going with Juno Cassandra. In this tutorial we are going to discuss specifically the domain model setup file. So prerequisites for this video is we presume you've already installed .NET Core 8, you've installed Juno Cassandra Desktop, and you are able to run Cassandra Desktop without error. We also presume that you have followed along with the part 1 of this tutorial video. I'll put a link to that video in the description box below, and if you followed along with that part 1 video, you've already downloaded the demo data and you've made your first model run with Juno Cassandra Desktop. Now we are going to discuss some aspects of the demo data, so it's quite important that you're already at that step. Now, so in that previous video we've discussed the key pieces of the puzzle for putting together a Cassandra model run. We discussed the projects folder, the concept of the work folder, the workbench setup file, model configurations, domain model setup file, project setup file, model input file, and finally the optional committed treatments file. So in this video, in the previous video, we've already discussed these first 4 elements. In this video, we're just going to take a walkthrough through the domain model setup file. So that's what this video is going to focus on. So what is the domain model? The domain model, if you've had a look at the documentation, is basically the rules and the submodels for a specific domain. For example, for a bridge model, for roads, water, and so on. And this is generally fully customizable. Now in this tutorial, we are using a pre-existing domain model, which is actually a fairly sophisticated model that we are actively using as the default Cassandra road network model for modeling road networks. So the logic in that model is fairly complex. I wouldn't recommend that you try to understand it at this stage. We will show you how to build a domain model from scratch in later videos. Our objective in this first tutorial is just to get you familiar with all of the concepts of everything that is involved in a Juno Cassandra model run. So this is where the domain model fits in the hierarchy. If you go to our online documentation, so here I am at the Juno Cassandra documentation. I'll put a link to this website in the description box below, and if you go to the concepts menu over here, then you will find a discussion of the framework model, the domain model, and the project, and you will understand how these different elements fit together. So today in this video we are focusing on the domain model specifically. Okay, so the domain model setup file is basically an Excel file that defines, first of all, the logic of your domain model using a special type of declarative logic which we call J functions. We define also in the model setup file the columns in your input file. We define the model parameters that you want to use in your domain model. We define default lookup tables and values that contain certain constants, thresholds, and things like that, which will then play a role in your domain model logic. We define also a table of treatments with their budget categories and unit cost rates, etc., that you want to consider in your domain model. We define treatment strategies that you want to consider for benefit cost analysis models. We define treatment suitability scores for the multi-criteria decision analysis or MCDA models. And also we define the objectives and the weights to consider for MCDA type of models. MCDA models are basically a multi-objective decision methodology, and therefore you can define multiple objectives and weigh them also in this setup configuration of your domain model. Finally, we have network functions. Now, network functions are basically functions that you can calculate to, for example, assign a RUT rank or a age rank or a normalization score, something like that, which you need to consider the entire network to calculate a value for each element in that network. and I'll point you to the help documentation on this topic because it is somewhat more advanced. Okay, so with that introduction, I'm going to open up the domain model setup file from the tutorial data that you should also have and have downloaded, and I recommend that you also open this file in Excel and have a look at it side by side while you follow along with this video. Alright, so here I am again in my work folder that you should now be familiar with from the previous video, and we looked in the previous video at this workbench file. So now I'm going to go into my inputs folder, and in this inputs folder are my committed treatments, my input set, my project data setup, and I'm going to focus on the domain model file. So if you can also just open that file, and we'll just take a quick scroll through all of the sheets in this setup file. Now the first thing to note is that these sheet names that you see here, they are mandatory. If you change any of these sheet names, then you will find an error is thrown before you can even set your workbench and before you can run your model. So don't change anything in the structure. You can add more sheets. For example, if you want to add a sheet here to add change log or make comments or document something, you can do that, but all of these sheets need to be present, and consider the names always to be case sensitive. The order of the sheets is not important, but this is a logical order that I recommend that you use. So I'm just going to remove this sheet. So let's walk through all of these sheets one by one. First of all is the function set. Now if you look at this, if you are new to Cassandra, as I presume most of you are, this logic will probably be very intimidating, but not to worry, we will over time, it will become more and more familiar for you. The key thing to understand is that the sheet named function underscore set is the sheet that in which you define the actual logic for your domain model. And if you scroll over to the right, you'll see there is a link that will allow you to go directly to your online documentation. And now I'm back here in the website, and it will explain to you basically what you define on that sheet. The next sheet is then the sheet called input headers, and this is basically just all of the input columns in your input file. So you can see our input columns are prefixed with the word file underscore, and then so each of these columns has to be in your input file, and then we have to define a data type for each type. So that's basically either number or text. We also put an example and a comment here. This is not strictly speaking necessary, but it is strongly recommended if you are building a domain model that you use that. Similarly, this category column is strictly speaking not necessary, but it helps you to categorize the groups in your input data as well. And again, we've added a link here in this tutorial demo data file so that you can quickly go to the help documentation to read more about that topic. Alright, the next sheet contains the model parameters. So you can see here our parameter names we have prefixed in this domain model with the word para, P-A-R-A underscore, and then you would find ADT for traffic, heavy commercial vehicles, and so on. You've got again data type, which is number or text, a minimum or a maximum. If it is text, then you of course don't need a minimum or a maximum. There's also a number of decimals. That is just for storing the data in the output file. So you can specify that to be fewer or more decimals, and then a comment. So I strongly recommend that if you build your own domain model, that you're very careful and rigorous about adding comments so that you and people that are going to use your model understand it down the line. And again, here is a link that you can click to read more about the different columns in this setup table. The next sheet contains lookups. So lookups consist of lookup sets. For example, you can see here is a lookup set that has the name candidate selection, and here we have got lookup keys and their values, and these keys and values combined with a lookup set name can be used to look up things in your function set in your domain model logic over here. And again, you can see more information by following this link in the help documentation about the lookup table definition, and you can also follow a link to go to understand what is in the lookup function, how this actually works in your J function logic. Next is the definition of treatments. This is fairly self-explanatory. We've got a name for each treatment, we've got a treatment category, and then a budget category. So the budget category can be the same as the treatment category, but generally you may want to have a monolithic budget where everything is grouped together, but when it comes to actually reporting on your treatments, you may want to specify a different category. So think about this category as the reporting category, and this as the budget category, which maps back to any budget constraints that you specify on your model. You'll also see there's a description and some comments here, and there is also a unit rate provided. Now, in the project level file, you can override this unit rate so that if you have one domain model that you use across many projects, then if certain projects have a different set of treatment costs, then you can always use that to define those treatment costs in your project setup file, and that will then override these rates in your domain model file at runtime. So we'll talk about the project level setup file in the next video. What I've done here on the side is I've just copied out these budget categories, and I've created two different sets. One where the budget is a split budget. You can see I've split my treatments into resurfacing, rehab, and pre-seals. And one where it's a monolithic budget, where I just have grouped all of these treatments together into one category called renewals. And I put it on the side here so that if I want to switch between a monolithic or a split budget, I can just take this, copy it, and paste it in here. Just make sure that you've got two empty rows here, otherwise you will find that when Cassandra tries to read this table, it will read a duplicate column header, and that will throw an error. So again, you can just follow this link to go to the help documentation. Next up is benefit cost analysis strategies. This is getting fairly sophisticated, and you need to understand more about the benefit cost analysis model to understand how this actually works. Again, if you follow this link, you'll see there's quite a lot of definition and commentary in the documentation on this. So I just recommend that you go and actually read that after you've watched this video if you are interested to actually use a benefit cost analysis model. Next up is the multi-criteria decision analysis treatments. So here you specify the quantity function that gives you the quantity to be used for each treatment. That can be then, in other words, the quantity isn't a fixed quantity necessarily, but it can be a function of the condition of the road, etc. Your suitability function, very important for multi-criteria decision analysis, basically makes assessment of how suitable a treatment is for a specific condition, and it does this through this function that is defined on the function set here, and you can have a different function for every type of treatment. So I won't discuss this in detail. Again, just go to the help documentation, and everything is discussed in detail for you there. And then we get to our multi-criteria decision analysis setup. I've already mentioned this before. So here, for example, I've got two objective types. These are built-in objectives, the MCDA treatment suitability score and the treatment cost. And you can have these two objectives, and you can give a weight to them. And then you can add from either your raw data or from model parameters. You can add additional parameters or numeric values that you want to consider in your multi-objective weighting system. So you can find more information at this link, and so I'll leave that for you to study in more detail. And then finally, we've got our network functions. So this is defined here. So in this example, we have got a percentage rank that is being calculated on the surface life achieved, on the RUT, on the surface distress index, and on the pavement distress index. And this is a fairly complex or advanced topic, network functions, but it is a very powerful feature. So just go and have a look at the help documentation to understand exactly what network functions are and how you can use it. And if you get stuck with that, just come and ask us about that. So those are all of the different elements that make up the definition of your domain model setup file. And once you have that clearly defined, you basically will be able to just use that domain model setup file across multiple projects if you want to, or you can keep that file inside of each specific project that you do, and you can make modifications to it as needed for that specific project as well. So that's it for this part 2 of this first tutorial. In the next video we will discuss the project level setup file. Thanks for watching.